Hello, good evening. Today is April 27th, Tuesday, 2021, and I'm recording a presentation, and this presentation will be given as a distinguished address tomorrow morning, April 28th morning at 8:15 Eastern Daylight Time at the Acm Codaspy 2021 conference. I'm Bhavani Thuraisingam from the University of Texas at Dallas. And this presentation is very special. It's not a technical presentation as one would expect at a flagship ACM Data and Application Security and Privacy Conference, but this is something that is really important for all of us, and that is on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so my talk is going to focus on mentoring, the role of mentoring for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then this would be followed by why we need careers in cybersecurity and data science for women and underrepresented minority communities. So there are two parts to the presentation. And why this is really important is because we really need diversity, diverse groups of people, not just ethnic origin, race, gender, religion, age, and also several other things like neurodiversity, LGBTQ, transgender community, autism community. So not just women and African Americans and Latino Americans, but also diverse groups of people. And we also want equity and inclusion. And I will explain what I mean by all three, or what is generally meant by all three. And so I've been quite involved in diversity, equity, and inclusion for the last, I would say, actually 20 years. It started when I was with the MITRE Corporation. I will talk about it during my presentation, but it was really the last 6-7 years. 2014-15 is when I really got motivated and involved to help and support diverse communities. And so, as I said, I usually record the presentation the night before and a couple of nights, a couple of evenings before the event, and then send the Zoom link, because just in case there is a technology glitch, because you never know. Like for instance, last Wednesday, our internet was down for quite a while. It was intermittent, on and off, on and off. And then also when we had the very cold weather in February, we didn't have internet for probably around for a couple of days. And so it's always good to have a backup presentation. Okay, so now I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so great. So again, the title of my talk, The Importance of Mentoring to Support Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, call it DEI, in particular cybersecurity and data science. Why am I mentioning cybersecurity and data science? Because I work in both areas, cybersecurity and data science, and in particular at the intersection of cybersecurity and data science. And so the conference that I'm going to give this presentation in the morning, that is the Acm Codaspy, Conference on Data and Application Security and Privacy. So this conference, the theme is at the intersection of cybersecurity and data science. Okay, so part one is going to focus more general, mentoring to support diversity, equity, and inclusion. The importance of mentoring. And I'm going to draw on my own experiences, how mentoring, lack of mentoring really had a negative impact on my career early on. And then when I found the right mentors, my career thrived. So mentoring is something you really need every step of your career. It doesn't matter whether you are 10 or whether you are 80 or 90, because you need mentors. These mentors when you're, of course, 10, 20, 30, 40, usually, typically they are older to you. But then as you get older, there are younger people who could mentor you. So mentoring is really crucial. Okay, so what is diversity, equity, and inclusion? So I got this information from the Ford Foundation, and here's the link to this information. And again, there's a lot of information on the web on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And many of them, they essentially say the same thing. And so I chose this particular definition because it was sort of, it appealed to me. But again, for no particular reason. I have no connection with Ford or anything like that. So what is diversity? It's the representation of all our varied identities and differences: race, ethnicity, gender, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, caste, socioeconomic status, thinking and communication styles, collections. And as individuals, we seek to proactively engage, understand, and draw on a variety of perspectives. We believe that the solution to the problems we hope to address through our grant making can be found by affirming our similarities as well as by finding value in our differences. So that's Ford's point of view, and it pretty much applies to almost all organizations. Right, what is equity? It's to ensure fair treatment, equality of opportunity, and fairness in access to information and resources for all. We believe this is only possible in an environment built on respect and dignity. So equity meaning that everyone is treated fairly, right? Even if you belong to the same gender or the same race or same ethnic origin, there are differences, because some people are sort of the chosen people and not everyone's, but everyone has to be treated fairly. And then what is inclusion? It builds a culture of belonging by actively inviting the contribution and participation of all people. We believe every person's voice adds value, and we strive to create balance in the face of power differences. We believe that no one person can or should be called upon to represent an entire community. So whenever you have meetings, you want to get the opinions of everyone, right? Not just the ones who always speak, but you want to get the opinions of even the quiet people, men, women, it doesn't matter. You want to be inclusive, right, of everyone. So all three are important, because you can just have diversity, but not equity and inclusion, but then you have different people, men and women, transgender and LGBTQ and old people and young people. Okay, that's diversity, but what's the point in having, without a doubt, diversity is a must, but then it wouldn't give much value. I don't want to say what's the point, it is important, but it wouldn't give much value if you don't have equity, because if you have men and women on a project or in a department, and then the men are given the privilege and given all the extra information and coaching and mentoring, and the women are not given that, right? So you have diversity there, but you do not have equity. And then if you want to make a decision, you only listen to the men and not the women, then you don't have inclusion. So you need all three. Okay, now having said that, I'm going to talk about mentoring and how important mentoring is. And then later on, I'm going to tie diversity, equity, and inclusion with mentoring. So yes, we are living in a very complex world that is rapidly evolving due to technology, right? So we are really living in a world that has no borders, in the sense 1 minute you can be in London, the next minute in New York, and the next minute in Shanghai or Tokyo or Paris, right? So Delhi. So it's just, we are living in a very complex, evolving world. But of course, COVID-19 has caused a lot of havoc in our lives. There's a World Wide Web and social media. It has eliminated boundaries and social norms, right? We know that. And with COVID-19, the work environment has drastically changed. And right now I'm reading the latest issue of the Harvard Business Review, and they're talking about how we can have sort of a hybrid work environment. So it's quite an interesting issue. So with COVID-19, things have changed. Some companies might be working online forever. There may be no offices at all, but then some companies, more traditional. But I think we are probably going to evolve into a hybrid model. Anyway, while there are numerous career opportunities, and then I'm a computer scientist, and I work in cybersecurity and data science, and somewhat also AI, but more in data science. In particular, lots of opportunities, right? You say computing is now everywhere, everything that we look at, right? Every activity almost everything that we do, right? It's based on computing. There's a microprocessor everywhere. So the competition is also extremely intense around the globe, because we are not just competing in the United States or Europe or Asia or Australia or Africa or South America. It's just everyone is competing for everything. Right? So there are more people, more opportunities, so competition becomes extremely intense. It's almost impossible for a person to succeed in his or her career without the advice and mentorship of the senior researchers, developers, technologists, managers. You really need a very strong support system. It's almost like a baby, right? How can a baby survive without the love and support of the parents and the grandparents and the siblings and the extended family, right? You need to nurture a baby, right? Feed the baby, nourish the baby, not just physically, but also psychologically and mentally. So that is how you need to think about when people start off in careers, because you really need that support system. It's so important. So almost every person I have known who has succeeded has had a mentor. In many cases, mentors, or they call it mentors, whatever way you want to pronounce it, who have guided him, her, and supported him, her during the early stages of his career. And I would not just say early stages, throughout one's careers, because I have mentored some people for example, when I joined University of Texas, Dallas, which was 16 plus years ago, I hired faculty, I mentored them, and they are now, superstars. And so I go to them now for some advice. What do you think I should do, right? I didn't do that in 2005, but I do that now in 2021, because you need, as I said, a very strong support system. Therefore, every career professional must have a mentor, regardless of their gender, race, ethnicity, age, and so on. Okay, so I'm just putting race and ethnicity together, but there is a difference between the two. Anyway, so I'm not going to differentiate. Okay, why do women and underrepresented minority communities struggle in their careers? I believe very strongly lack of a mentor is perhaps the most important reason that women and minority communities have not done as well in their careers. Another could be bias, because we live in a world that there's a lot of bias, right? Even I don't think there's any person without a bias. I do have my biases, and I'm sure each one of y'all will be having your biases, right? So lack of opportunity start at an early age, right? When we are growing up, I grew up in a family of all girls, so I didn't see boys being given preferences. But boys are given preferences over girls in almost every culture. And as time progresses, girls are left behind in schools, colleges, and in the workforce. My mother grew up in a very large family, 5 boys and 5 girls. She was really very, very smart in mathematics. And at times, she had a brother who was, I think, about a year or 2 older to her, who was not very good. And so she caught up with him in class. And sometimes he would tell, apparently, my grandmother for my mother not to attend school. So for 1 year, my grandmother kept my mother at home just because her older brother didn't want her to attend. But she really fought, and she said, no, I'm going to study. And so she studied at home, and then she went and passed all the exams. And then she was in first year in college when she, had to get married, because, that's how things were in those days. But anyway, coming back, so boys are given preferences, right? Practically in every culture. There's no culture that I know that boys are not, that girls are given preferences over boys. So the women mainly work to supplement their husband's incomes, right? So typically, even, most families, right? So husband is the one who's mainly, focusing on his career. and then the women are there to work and get money. And while they are working, they could develop their careers. But again, it's always most of the time, not always, a lot of the time it's to support the family. Minority communities also have a tremendous disadvantage, as often their parents are not as educated, right, as those from non-minority communities. And so minority boys and girls have a huge handicap. So like for instance, my parents, I mean, they came from a sort of a lower middle class family, I would say, originally we are Tamils from Sri Lanka. And they had up to high school education. My mother was in first year sort of college, they call it inter. I don't know. She was, focusing on a London degree, a BA. Didn't have as much education, but then wealthier, because education was expensive at that time. You had to pay for your education. I think in the late 1940s, things changed where, you could get free education. But if you're from a wealthier family, my mother had some cousins who were from fairly wealthy, but they went to university, right? So, and they became doctors and lawyers. And so that gives them a head start. So minority boys and girls have a huge handicap. If the women and minority communities are fortunate enough to get an education and a good job, there are very few from these communities who are at higher positions. And so the junior researchers, developers, technologists are often ignored and left to fend for themselves. So when I was having, I've had a career for 40 years, and early on in my career, it was hard because there was really no one like me, right, at the higher levels. So I had to sort of struggle to figure out, how to get on. So they see their non-minority colleagues thrive, possibly due to extensive mentoring they receive, and get frustrated, and that sort of gets into a vicious cycle. One of the things that we are fortunate, especially if we stay in the technical side and don't have to compete for management positions to become vice presidents or directors or deans, if we develop a passion for our research and for our work, then you are not going to really get so disappointed, because you just, of course, mentors are helpful, very useful, but still you can work, and with your talent, you could succeed somewhat. You can go someplace. But again, if you want to get into those, corner offices, as they say, you really need those mentors. Right. What should be done to handle this problem? The first step is to realize there is a problem. People, especially those in non-minority communities, do not realize there is a problem, right? If you talk to in many cases, you talk to non-minority people, is there racism? Is there discrimination? I don't think, they have an understanding. And again, in cases where, say, I am in the minority, right? Say among women, right? If you talk of me, look at me as a woman, right? There are so many women, right? So among women, so I might say that, there may not be, discrimination or something against someone else, right? Even among women, there are different types of women, right? There are African-American women, there are Asian American, there are South Asians, there are Caucasians. So there are, different women. And so we will say, oh, there's, we are all being discriminated against. It's tough for all of us. But we don't realize that for some communities, it's harder than the other communities. And again, so affirmative action programs, right, have been around for a long time, but these programs do not attempt to support the genuine growth of women and minorities. And many people, they have been frowned upon. Oh, she's in that position because she's a woman. So in fact, I got this Woman of Color Research Leadership Award in 2001 by Career Communications, Inc. It's mostly run by African Americans, but it's a woman of color. So one of my colleagues, a Caucasian man, he said, oh, it's okay, you are a woman, so you get that award. I don't get to have that award, right? So that's sort of attitude, right? So yes, but in a way, I'm fortunate I'm a woman, I'm getting the award, but there's in many ways is much more fortunate than myself, because again, if you're born in the United States and if you're Caucasian and if you have some education, you really have it made, right? If you come from somewhere else, especially a third world country, it's that much harder. Nevertheless, I'm really grateful that I've had all these opportunities. So United States, I want to say, it's a wonderful place. It's given me and my family a great life, a great living. But still, we have to make sure that everyone is treated equally. There's equity. thanks to the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter movement, people are getting more educated about the problem. We must empower everyone. I'm really grateful, especially to the Black Lives Matter, right? That has been really strong because you see so many injustices. And so that has really, especially George Floyd, all of that has had a tremendous impact. I've begun to realize what the problem, there are really serious problems. And then, of course, we had the Me Too in 2017 and starting in 2017. So as a result, there's much more awareness about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is not about giving a job to a person because she's a woman. I don't want to be treated specially just because I'm a woman. It's about building a safe and inclusive work environment where everyone can thrive. See, I want to be given the same opportunities, equity opportunities that a man has, right? That's what we are asking for, equity and inclusion. I hope that these are not just words, that all of us can work together to handle the challenges that women and minority communities are faced with today. We must not only focus on the advancement of women, which is a must, right? Because women, we are mothers, we are grandmothers, we are caregivers, we are a very, very important part of society, right? A lot depends on us. I'm not saying men are not important, but women have a very special role being parents. We must also include mothers. We must also include every disadvantaged community, including African Americans, Hispanic/Latino Americans, Native Americans, LGBTQ, people with disability, neurodiversity, autism, Asperger's syndrome, and the elderly. We have to go beyond our own gender, race, ethnicity, and help everyone to succeed. Okay, so now I'm going to start my personal story. As I said, I'm a Tamil of Sri Lankan origin, and I grew up in Sri Lanka for the first 20 years of my life. And then I got married. It was an arranged marriage. Of course, I had a choice. And so my husband was 8 years older. He was finishing his PhD at the University of Cambridge in England. And so I went to the UK and got my master's and PhD. I was educated at the University of Bristol and then moved to the United States in 1980, and my son was a baby. And so I've had, there are different talks I've given over the years where I've talked about, my career, how I got to be where I am today. But here I'm going to focus not so much on, my career, more on how mentoring has helped me. Okay, so back in the early to mid 1990s, I was in my mid to late 30s, and I was really thriving doing technical work. I really was very, very passionate about my research and my publications and so on. So the general impression was Bhavani is very good in her work due to my outstanding, I had very good publication record and the ability, I had several projects I'd established with the Army, Navy, Air Force, and so on. And I was also quite good in getting funding. And so at that time, there was a very highly visible position opening up at work, and I was quite interested in it. And so I felt that with, because of my credentials, that I would be very well suited for the job, but hardly anyone thought of me as a contender. And I wouldn't say it was purposely, it was discrimination, it was perhaps unconscious bias, right? So fortunately, I was very fortunate. There was a lady. She was working with me. She was just a few years older to me, I think about 3 or 4 years older to me. She recognized my talent and my capability, and she recommended me for the position. Okay, I don't want to mention any names. So there was one other person, let's call that person X, who was also competing for the position. And I was told by this lady, right, the person who was supporting me, that X's supporters were undermining me. So what were they saying? She heard comments like, Bhavani is a loner. I don't know why they would say that when I was leading team projects. Bhavani is not a team player. How can I not be a team player when I'm organizing and managing 3 to 4 team projects? Bhavani is not that great technically, even though my research published in top tier venues. It was far better than almost anyone else who was working with me at the time. And I was leading multiple research teams. So when people start saying these things negative, right? When you start saying false, spreading, sort of keeping on repeating false information, and when people hear it, and there's there could already be an unconscious bias because, I'm not a white male. I'm not even a white woman. And so when, so people start thinking, especially coming from a third world country, people, especially at that time, we're talking about, 30 years ago, bound to get biased, right? So I had some very supportive managers, my managers who wanted me to get the position, but they were very puzzled about these comments. They did defend me, but this lady felt, she's my colleague, a few years senior, friendly, supporting me. She said, look, these people, they respect you, but they are very puzzled that all these comments are coming from fairly high level people who were with this excess team. And so they said, okay, she said, okay, you need to provide more evidence of your excellent work. And so if not for this lady, remember there was someone who was there, who was high up, she was higher than me in a higher position, who wanted to support me strongly, I would never have known there was even a problem, right? That's when I acted. So I remember that evening, I had dropped my husband and son because my husband, he was at MIT at that time. And so summers he would spend at University of Exeter. So he would take my son who was, probably 12 or 13 years old at the time. And so I dropped them at the airport and I was thinking, coming back home, what should I do? Because that afternoon, my colleague had told me, my friend. So I contacted my mentor, Professor C.V. Ramamurthy, he's Professor Ram at UC Berkeley. And I owe a lot to Professor Ram, my career. We strategized, we talked for hours that evening. And then what did we say? So as a result of that, he said, he calls me Dr. Bhavani. Later, he started calling me Professor Bhavani. Dr. Bhavani, you need to get some very strong support letters from very important people. So then I requested my sponsors very high up in the government. They really loved my work and my mentoring, right? I was a mentor to some of the junior researchers in these agencies to write letters of support for me. I also asked someone higher up in the organization to support me. And so he was fairly high up, right? He was a director, and later he became the CEO of the Mitocorp of the company, right? I'm sorry, I said Mito Corporation. Yeah. So, because everyone who would look at my CV would know that in the 90s I was there. So I asked him because he was I had worked on his project. So he got he was a director at that time. So he got a senior vice president to write a strong letter. So both of them signed that letter. So within a week, my main boss, who really wanted to help me, but he was puzzled, right, about the things that were being said about me, got numerous letters. He started getting all these letters from very important people, right? And so not just about that I was how good I was in my research and development efforts, what an asset I was to their organization. And when it comes from sort of the highest levels of the government, it's a huge thing. And what a team player I was and how I mentored the junior faculty. They also mentioned, right, I was a mentor to some of the junior researchers in the agencies who were beginning their careers. They were in their mid-20s, and I was sort of in my mid to late 30s. So my boss was very pleased. So he had all the, they call the word ammunition, all the sort of ammunition he needed. So he made a strong case and I got the position. So, right, I was around 38 at the time and the position was crucial for my career. So soon after that, thanks to Professor Ram, I got nominated for awards like IEEE Computer Science Technical Achievement Award, IEEE Fellow. And so as they say, the rich become richer. So when you start getting awards, right, then more people want to give you awards, you get recognized, so they want to nominate you, which I received, and that propelled me to huge career success. Today, I have a very strong support team with great colleagues. I would really like to thank Professor Elisa Bertino. We have really supported each other so much. Professor Daphne Yao, who gave a keynote address yesterday, or actually this morning at Codaspy, and she got the Codaspy Lasting Research Award. And also I'm only mentioning the female colleagues. There are also male colleagues like the session chair, Professor Ravi Sandhu. He and I go back to the 1980s. So do Elisa and I. And then our conference general chair, Anupam Joshi. Of course, Anupam and Daphne are, more junior, but still they are strong, supportive colleagues. So today I'm a fellow of ACM, IEEE, AAAS, NAI. And also I was named, I'm not trying to brag, but one of the 500 most influential people in DFW. And in Dallas-Fort Worth, we have 7.6 million people, the Dallas CEO magazine. And so I've received, many, many awards and credentials and so on, but I attribute it to the mentoring, right? The difficulty I had, and then the mentoring support I got. So I was very fortunate. Why? Because this lady happened to be working with me and was senior to me, and she was respected. And so together we strategized what to do. But we cannot just depend on luck. I was lucky, right? We have to make an effort to get a mentor from day one, regardless of whether we are in high school, college, or in workforce. That's why I mentor students all the time. I'm an official mentor for some high school students. In fact, today, this late morning, right, I was at the conference, the keynote speech, and Daphne's keynote, and then I gave the awards. And then after that, I had a meeting with my mentee. She is in grade 11. She goes to a DFW high school, and I'm officially mentoring her. Of course, I had to go through all the process because she's, when you want to mentor someone under 18, she's 17, I think. So I had to go through all the process. And so background checks and so on. So I'm now an official mentor. And so I'm guiding her for her project to do it in cybersecurity and risk, right? So it doesn't matter, day one, whether you're in high school, college, or in the workforce. We must talk to senior people, not one, but many, to see who would be willing to be our mentor, and also see whether we have good rapport with him or her. Ever since that experience, I've always had a mentor, even to this day. But I have also been a mentor to many people as I understand how they feel. I always motivate and encourage them. So that's really, mentoring has been really one of my really strong points. And you can talk to anyone that I work with and they will tell you why there is a tendency for me to mentor women. Okay, so that's something that I have to be more conscious because I'm a woman. So you feel more comfortable, right? Again, the same bias that I have to always remind myself, right? I'm a woman, but I need to mentor men and women. So, but while there's a tendency, I've tried my best to also mentor men of all races, right? So in my team, there are many men and I mentored them. I have worked hard to recruit, often through my colleagues, to get PhD students who are women from the minority communities and the LGBTQ communities. So out of the 23 of my PhD students, who have either graduated or under supervision. So I would have finished, all of them will be graduating by sometime next year. I've graduated 19, number 20 is going to be finishing in a couple of months. And then I've got 3 more. At least 50% are women and a few from the African-American, Hispanic American, not Americas, American, and the LGBTQ communities. I still need to do so much more, right? Especially, I think I really need to do more for the transgender community. So that's something that, I'll talk to you all about it, talk a little bit my experience later on. I benefit a great deal from mentoring and learning from the mentees, right? So they can educate me also. I see them motivated, that motivates me. Okay, so advice to mentors, first and foremost, junior faculty and researchers are coming to you because you are successful in what you are doing. Likely you are in this position because there's at least one person who has helped you in your education and career. So never forget that. There's something is really important. You should never forget where you came from, your roots. Okay. So sometimes when I complain something about my work to my husband, he says, think about where you came from. You went to school in a rickshaw, right? A man-drawn rickshaw from grade 1 to grade 5 or 6. Then I went to a boarding school after that run by Irish nuns, but I went to my elementary school in a man-drawn rickshaw. And so he says, don't forget that, from there, look how much you have accomplished. Okay, so when a junior faculty needs mentorship, please be there for them. If it is hard for you, example, due to time commitment, please try and connect them to others. Mentorship can be very rewarding and uplifting. So like today I was mentoring this girl for an hour and close to an hour. And then I felt so happy afterwards. Once you start mentoring, it can bring you great joy. Seeing your mentees thrive, it's almost like being a parent, right? imagine, right, how thrilled you are when your children, get accolades, or when they are just happy, right? That makes you really happy. And when they are sad, that's it. Your day is gone, right? So it's like that. Together, you can work with the mentee on the research areas he should work on. You have more experience, and so you can give him her advice on challenging problems, who to talk to, and if she has potential in management, then encourage them to become a department head. Right? So we need more, this is really important what I'm going to say. We need more department heads from the female and minority communities so that we can have more deans, right? So if you have 20 department heads and you have to select one dean from that, and you have 18 of them are men and 2 are women, right? So the chances of selecting a man, if you work out the probability, much, much, much higher, right? Or if you have 18 Caucasians and 2 African Americans, right, chances of a dean being a Caucasian, it's much higher. So perhaps 10 department head positions for 1 dean position, right? So you need 10 women to have a chance, 10 out of 20. Also the mentees who are likely younger, right? And again, you can have breakthrough, and it's well known, right? When you are younger, you can have more breakthrough ideas and you can work together with them. Right. So, and that's true, because sometimes I look at the papers I wrote when I was, 25, 28 and so on. Did I really write this single author papers with so much mathematics in there? I just look at it in amazement. Did I really do this work? Right. And it was all my work. So anyway, so your mentees will have some breakthrough ideas that maybe you can work together and that could benefit you as well. Okay. Advice to mentees, please be patient. Do everything you can to find mentors that you can work with, right? It applies to also your advisors and supervisors, but your mentor, remember, not your psychologist. It is a working arrangement where you both benefit. Don't go to your mentor's office and start crying and saying, this person is doing this to you, this person is doing that to you. No, your mentor is not your psychologist, okay? Plan on what you will be discussing with your mentor. Focus on education and career advancement, right? Not complain about colleagues. Once you develop a rapport with your mentor, it is the most rewarding relationship. I mean, the relationship I had with Professor Ramamurthy was just wonderful. And unfortunately, he passed away 5 years ago, just 5 years ago. And so I really, really missed him. In the beginning, right, he passed away in 2016. So like 17, 18, any new opportunity or something, I would say, oh, I have to call Professor Ram and find out what he thinks. And then I know poor Professor Ram is no longer with us. Anyway, so if the mentor, okay, if there's a new position you want to be considered, then discuss with your mentor whether it is the right position for you and how you might go about getting the position. If the mentor is not encouraging, right, you need to ask why. And I hope the mentor will have valid reasons. Good to set up a time, say once a week for 30 minutes to meet with the mentor. Also, once you have gotten all what you can from your mentor and you are successful, never forget your mentor, right? That's not good. Never forget how you got to where you are. This does not mean you have to do whatever your mentor wants. No. Mentor, you are not sort of bound to your mentor. No. But a good mentor will not expect that. But you have to show respect. Okay, so that's so mentoring. Now I'm going to come back to diversity, right? I talked a little bit about diversity throughout this presentation. So let's tie it together. Every organization, so mentoring is crucial for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Every organization must have policies for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then I'm looking at organizations, more and more organizations have policies now. However, we cannot just arbitrarily bring people with diverse backgrounds without the needed skills appropriate for the job with respect to multiple dimensions, technical, management, leadership, and so on needed for the job. You can't just go to the street and pick the man or woman on the street and say, come and work. No, you've got to give them the training and the skills and the support. Good mentoring will enable a person, because you don't want to set people up to fail, right? You don't want to do that. That's why you need to, it's so important, because it's not just about diversity. It's, yes, you need diversity, but what's the point in having men and women and giving all the preferences to men and not to the women, right? So that's why good mentoring will enable a person to understand the culture of the organization, because when I went into some of these organizations, I did not understand the culture. And so it took me a long time, because initially I didn't have a mentor. Then after that episode I mentioned, I had mentors. And so they sort of explained to me, you need to do this, you need to do that, and what it takes to succeed, and then pursue a plan of action, such as taking courses, working on degrees, and taking on more challenges. This will in turn enable the person to complete at the highest level for the job, right? So that's really important. The organization must ensure that every individual is given access to mentoring, support, and any other support needed, regardless of the person's background, gender, race, age, so that she can succeed and be considered for awards and promotions. That is, mentoring is essential to support diversity, equity, inclusion. Similarly, an organization supporting DEI must ensure that every individual gets strong mentoring support for career advancement. And also, I believe very strongly we need domain-specific mentors. Okay, if you want someone working in cybersecurity and data science, yes, you need to talk to people in cybersecurity and data science. Not just generalists, not that generalists are not important. So when I talk about generalists, in general, psychologists, career coaches, they all have a role, but they wouldn't know, right, that we focus on top tier conferences like Acm Codaspy, right? Not just only journals. So only those working in your field really understand what you need to do to advance in your education and career. As I said, right? Psychologists will say, okay, publish in the top psychology journals. And so, but for us, it's the top tier conferences are most important. So I'm also an official mentor for several junior professors, not just in my team, throughout the university, for my officer vice president for research. So usually March is the month of mentoring. So I probably mentored around 12 all of March. So I've been doing this for 3 years. And then yesterday, I think I had a lady, she was a top psychologist. And so I now understand so I study before I do the mentoring, I study what's required. And I'm fascinated. I'm learning so much about the labs that they have, like in chemistry and so on, so different from what we are doing. So I've sort of learned about what the other areas also what they need, but still what I'm best at mentoring, right, I understand is cybersecurity and data science. Okay, so now part 2, I've got a few more charts. So why a career? Now I'm going to get very specific. Cybersecurity and data science for women and underrepresented minorities, right? So we need more women and underrepresented minorities in both cybersecurity and data science. In general, computer science, but again, I'm focusing, this is a Codaspy conference, intersection of cybersecurity and data science. There are so many opportunities in cybersecurity and data science, without a doubt, right? 2 of the hottest fields, I would say, data science / AI, right? You need it everywhere you hear. And of course, every system that has a microprocessor, right, could be attacked. So you need cybersecurity. Yet so few women and members from minority communities work in these fields. And I would say, right, only around 10%, although we need to take some official numbers, and these are sort of what I'm hearing. So, I'm not saying this is sort of like the gospel, the numbers I'm quoting, but generally that's sort of the accepted, that's what, in general, the feeling is. Around 10% of those in cybersecurity are women, and even fewer people from minority communities work in this critical area. The percentage of women in data science AI, I think it's slightly better, especially data science, but not much higher. I would say about 20-25%. The percentage working in this highly lucrative field from the minority communities, I believe, is even less. Women and those from minority communities are losing out, not just intellectually just fantastic, but most fields are intellectually challenging anyway, but also financially. These are high-paying fields. We urgently need mentors to motivate the members from these diverse communities and encourage them to get into these important fields. And we can do it if we all work together. Okay, so what are the challenges faced by women, underrepresented minority communities, especially the transgender? So this is really a little bit more general, this chart. We face challenges because we are a minority community and we don't have the numbers to represent and support us at the higher levels, right? So again, the higher levels, right, presidents and so on, vice presidents, mostly men, right? And they are mostly in the United States, they are Caucasian, mostly Caucasian men, but, probably in if you go to, say, India, there'll be mostly sort of Indian men, right? So even those who have made it, so we need more people. That's what I'm saying. More department heads, and you can have more deans, more provosts, more presidents. We face that, so we are facing, we already sort of have a handicap. Even those who have made it to the top, you know, female or minority communities, they are sometimes reluctant to support others like them in case they are perceived badly by their peers. Oh, he's favoring the African Americans because he's an African American. Oh, she's a woman, she favors women. So that's, you know, there is a tendency for that. So they are extra careful. Remember, your peers are always supporting people who are like them, right? They may be criticizing that you are supporting people of your own ethnic, gender, and so on. If we don't support people who are like us, then who else will? Okay. But again, as I said, you don't just pluck someone from a tree or a man walking on the road or a woman and drag them. You've got to give them the support. Why not nurture and support those who have no voice or a piece of the pie? While there are some efforts now to support women in cybersecurity, you know, women in data science, that's a famous Stanford University's Women in Data Science. And there are limited efforts to support underrepresented minority communities, example, societies for Black engineers, Hispanic engineers. There are hardly any efforts, I would say, to support the LGBTQ communities. So that's a community we really need to work. And in particular, the transgender community is among the most discriminated communities. And we need to do all we can to support this community and make them feel welcome. So one of my sort of a heartbreaking situation for me, I've had LGBTQ students and successfully graduated PhD students. I had a master's student who was a transgender, and it was, you know, I really wanted to help her and support her, but, you know, with transgender, because they could get unhappy and so on, because it's really different, I think, being transgender. So I really wanted to support her. And this was some time ago, and I have a transgender friend. And so I wanted to talk to my transgender, so not a friend, sort of a colleague. I wanted to talk to my transgender colleague, but I didn't really want to sort of upset her, because sometimes, you know, when you're transgender, you may sort of want to forget about the life that you had before you changed your gender. So I didn't want to offend her. So at least now I know that, you know, there are communities I could reach out, not maybe a particular person, say, okay, I have these transgender students, or talk to my transgender friend and say, how can you help? Go to these communities and see if they can support. So that's what I'll be doing in the future. And there's also all types of diversity. There's neurodiversity, autistic communities. Some of the people with autism, they are the most brilliant people. When I was in college, I had there was a colleague of mine, he was autistic, and he was my project partner. Oh, he was super brilliant in programming. It was just like such a whiz kid. And so we need to encourage more people, these brilliant people like them, into cybersecurity and data science. So that's something that I've been talking to another colleague of mine who is interested in autism and cybersecurity. And so these are some of the things I would like to get more involved in the future. Okay, so now a few more charts. 10 reasons why a career in cybersecurity and or data science AI for female and underrepresented minority communities. First, given the opportunity, women underrepresented minority communities can excel in any computing field. Cybersecurity and data science are very exciting fields. And so with many innovations and developments happening so rapidly. So why not get engaged in such a intellectually challenging fields? It can be integrated with many areas. Women like also arts and humanities, right? So you can integrate security there, or data science, natural sciences, social sciences, engineering, business, medicine, law, with a need for IoT and related technologies. There are many options from research and academia to product development, startups with substantial funding. You know, AI startups, the #1 area these days. And even cybersecurity, there are quite a few startups. So why not get women and the minority communities get more involved? Millennial women, underrepresented communities and beyond, have the flexibility and freedom to choose their careers. And there are more and more female and underrepresented role models in the field that us baby boomers never had. So yes, while we have such a long way to go, I would say the millennials are better off than than we were because we didn't really have these role models. In many research areas, you can work from home most days, making it ideal, especially for women, to have a family and career, right? So, and even for underrepresented minorities, right? That's important too. But, balancing family and career, we always think about women doing that. Okay. So continuing, 10 reasons why a career in cybersecurity or data science, right? Many cybersecurity and data science AI jobs cannot be overtaken by robots, right? You need the programming skills and so on. We need researchers and developers to collect and analyze massive amounts of data from IoT systems, from other systems. So there's a real need. So your jobs are not going to go away. Cybersecurity, data science are highly paid fields with numerous job opportunities. Why not female underrepresented communities take advantage of these benefits? Female underrepresented communities can be financially independent. This is really, really important. Please pay attention. Female underrepresented communities can be financially independent with a career in cybersecurity data science because they are high-paying fields. And I really strongly believe financial independence means self-respect, less stress, and confidence. Having financial independence is a must for everyone, especially for a woman. I say that for a woman because we know that men are stronger than women. And we know that in marriages, right, when you talk about spousal abuse and so on, yes, sometimes the women abuse the men, but more often the men abuse the women. But many women stay in unhappy marriages because there's no choice, because of financial reasons, right? Husbands have all these high-paying jobs. But if you have a high-paying job, you are not going to put up with nonsense from your spouse. And so that's why I'm stressing for a woman. But for underrepresented minority communities too, it's really important to have a high-paying job for different reasons. Not that I'm not saying, say, if he's an underrepresented man, I'm not saying that, okay, sometimes his wife might abuse him, but not for those reasons. If it's a man, right, if he has a high-paying job and he has got that confidence, he won't get so undermined if, say, the other. So if it's an African-American man, I would say if he has a high-paying job and so on, he'll have more confidence and will not get undermined maybe if a Caucasian, some uneducated Caucasian person says bad things to him because he has got that confidence, because he has got that high-paying job. So that is really important for self-respect. So again, that's why I put it in red. Having financial independence is a must for everyone. I say, especially for a woman, I gave my reasons, as well as those in underrepresented minority communities. And I've given my reasons for that too. Computing systems are everywhere from north to south, east to west. Therefore, these systems can be hacked. You can make the world better and safer place with cybersecurity, including addressing the major problem of violence against women and children with technology. So I gave a talk at last year's Codaspy, AI for Good, and representing and protecting children against, it was related to violence against women and children. So that was my last year's banquet address at Codaspy. Okay, now I think this is the last chart. Last two. What can ACM, now that we are in Codaspy, what can ACM Codaspy community do to support diversity, equity, inclusion? So I have worked in data and application security and privacy since fall 1985. At that time, we didn't talk much about privacy, data and application security, intersection of cybersecurity and data science. So that's the DASPy community. The good news is the DASPy community has had multiple women pioneers, right? We've had Dorothy Denning. She, came, I was fortunate to work with her on a sister project. I was at Honeywell and she was at SRI. She is a legend. And we now have Elisa Bertino. She is like the #1 person in data and application security and privacy. And she's at Purdue. And Latanya Sweeney, professor at Harvard. I mean, she is the person for privacy. She came up with K-anonymity. And so we have these 3 brilliant women, okay? And there are many more, otherwise, so there are more women too. So, and I would say around 20 is very interesting. And I've always when I go to meetings, I start counting, right? If you're in workshops, I can count how many men, how many women, and I write it down. So over the years, 25% of the DASPy community have been around women. Of course, we need to do an official survey. So when I used to go to the data and application security conferences, it was like in 1990, 91, 92, my husband would say when I talk about things, how come there are so many women in data and application security and privacy? Although at that time it was data and application security. So 25% I think is quite a lot. I mean, if you have 20 people, at least 5 would be women, right? Or even more. However, women are still only around 25%, right? Maybe a little bit more, but that's not enough. And we need to do much better with the underrepresented minority communities. And that's something we are really, really behind, right? So fortunately, we have Latanya Sweeney, brilliant woman, African-American lady, right? But we need more people like her, right? Men and women like Latanya. These communities, so we need to do much better. These communities are vastly underrepresented in industry, as well as in cybersecurity and data science, right? So we need to do a lot more work. We need to work together as a team and address this huge problem. Need inputs from everyone. So what should we do? And I would like to get feedback from you all. Should we organize an annual DEI workshop together with the Codaspy? Codaspy is the conference, right? So should we have a workshop associated with Codaspy? So last 2 weeks ago, I'm also part of the IEEE ICDE, International Conference on Data Engineering, the steering committee. And so 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting. It's an international community. So they asked me, I think I volunteered to lead, because I've been doing a lot of efforts for women in data science, the Stanford University event for this data engineering. I've been doing that. I did that last year, organized a workshop. And so I will be leading an effort on DEI for this IEEE ICDE community. So I'd like to do something similar, maybe not lead, but I'll be happy to lead or work with everyone. A similar thing for Acm Codaspy, and have a workshop maybe every year on DEI. So that will be really nice. I'll really love to do that, but I need to work with the team. And that team should not just be women. We should also need men. Of course, we cannot, do all this work without the support of men, especially men from majority communities. And we also need to have minority community folks in our team. Otherwise, it's not just men and women. We need to have women. We need to have African Americans. We need to have Latino Americans. We need to have hopefully LGBTQ if they would want to be part of it. I would love to have some transgender folks. So they say it takes a village to raise a child. I think that was Hillary Clinton's title of a book, I believe. It takes a village to raise a child. So, and I say it takes the world to address DEI. It's not just, and I'm talking a lot okay. So this presentation that I've given, it's very US centric, right? When I talk about women, LGBTQ, and African Americans and Latino Americans, every country has got minority communities. In fact, as I said, I'm a Tamil from Sri Lanka. I came from a minority community, right? Tamils they were like 20%, I think, or maybe even less in Sri Lanka. It's a majority race. So I come from a minority community. Similarly, every country has got minority communities. And so UK has got their minority communities, and so does Africa has got their minority communities, and South America has got their minority communities. So I really want to generalize it, right? So how do we address diversity, equity, and inclusion? So it's not, although this presentation is US specific, we have to apply this to every country, right? Because the policies in every country are different. And I talk about LGBTQ, transgender. In some countries, I would not even be allowed to mention the name transgender, probably, okay? So each one of us must do our part in whatever way we can. And again, please note, this presentation is US centric, but we have to address this every community in every country, so country by country. And of course, we need the support of the majority communities, right? If not for, I would say, the Caucasian men, right? We may not be in this situation, but of course, because and my husband always tells me, if not for the African-American community or the Jewish community, he tells me, you will not be in the position where you are today, because they really worked hard, right? But so they are the ones who really worked hard. But then there must have been some folks from the Caucasian male community who would have understood the situation, because otherwise, how would we be where we are today, right? So we need the support of the majority community. So we need everyone to work on this. Okay, in conclusion, from equity talk to equity walk. I'm reading that book, by the way. This is the book. Okay. Shall I say, I don't know how to put this. Okay, from equity talk to equity walk. Authors are not Toa, Tia Brown McNair. I need to change that. Estella Mara Ben Simon and Lindsay Malcolm Piquet. John Wiley and Sons, 2020. So I'm reading this. And essentially the gist of the message is we must walk the walk and not just talk the talk. Okay, talking is important, like what I'm saying, but we've got to also show in action. We must walk. Okay, so it's not like saying that, oh, I need to do all this exercise and never get to do it. So we have to talk and we must walk. Okay, so I think I have taken, I'm going to stop sharing. Right, so I've taken quite a bit of time actually for this presentation. So tomorrow I'm going to give this presentation. It's only 19 charts, but I think I've taken over an hour, probably about, yeah, just over an hour. But I've got to limit this to 1 hour tomorrow morning. And so, and again, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'm really grateful to the Codaspy Steering Committee, as well as the Codaspy Conference Committee, in particular, Elisa Bertino, Ravisandu, Ramkrishnan, Gail Ann, and the Conference Committee, Anupam Joshi, and Rakesh Verma, and Barbara Kaminati, all of them. Thanks to everyone, and also Ravisandu for chairing this session. And again, I'm looking forward to, hopefully, if the steering committee approves, then have a workshop on diversity, equity, and inclusion at Codaspy 2022. That's going to be probably a year from now. And I'm really looking forward to, because as I said, we have come a long way, but it's still a drop in the ocean. There's so much for us to do. Okay, so, and we have to, every single person is important, right? And so, and every single person, you need to give all the tools and the opportunities for him or her to succeed. And we have to listen to the voice of every person. So diversity, equity, inclusion, all three go hand in hand. Okay, so you can't have equity without diversity, diversity without equity, and inclusion without, so all three are very, very important. And thank you very much. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. I've got my email address, so hearing from you about your views so that we can really have a very nice workshop next year. And of course, I've got to get the approval from the steering committee and the conference organizers for next year. Thank you. And I'm going to stop recording. And yes, I'm going to see you all tomorrow, hopefully tomorrow morning. Yeah, so I'm going to stop recording.